Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Great. Yeah, I had a little audio miscue. So thank you, everyone, for joining our ActiveTrust Cloud demo series today. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join. My name is Troy Hager. I'm the Director of Product Management for our SaaS applications. With me, I have Blair Rampling, our product manager for the ActiveTrust Cloud product line. And together we're going to walk you through a little presentation and a live demonstration of the product. Let's take a look at the agenda for the session today. We're going to talk a little bit about why DNS is vulnerable. Then we're going to cover some of the DNS security challenges that customers face today. We'll move into an overview of the ActiveTrust Cloud solution. And then we'll finish up with an actual live demo that Blair will be performing of the actual product. If you have any questions, you can put them into the chat window, and I'm sure someone will be able to kind of keep up and respond with some of the chats as well. So first, there are many, methods out there that the bad actors use in exploiting DNS. We won't really have a chance to cover all of them today on this short demo series, but this on the screen here, you can see some of the different information that we've gathered from various surveys out there around how DNS is used as a common way to exploit your networks and do data exfiltration, including things like DNS tunneling, using exfiltration, overloading DNS queries and embedding confidential information in DNS queries and streaming that out of your network. The use of DNS in the propagation of malware. There's actually a lot of other types of threats. The ActiveTrust Cloud covers over 240 different threat properties. We'll talk a little bit more about threat intelligence and how that plays a role in the solution and a little bit later in the slides here. But this is just a great kind of overview slide of the breadth and of the actual need for DNS security. So what are some of the DNS security challenges that customers face today? We're going to take a look at kind of three of the main primary areas. Of course, there are others not captured here, but for purposes of just, getting the high level areas that we focus on out there, we'll run through these three. So the number one is prevention and detection, right? So there's a lot of different threats going on over DNS. We want to help customers be able to prevent and detect those types of threats as they're happening. DNS is a great way, because it's such a core to all the services that run, to be able to provide that kind of a DNS firewall capability. DNS is not traditionally protected by your other security solutions, whether it be a SIEM or a NAC or a firewall. So DNS often is left unprotected by a lot of customers out there. And so that's part of what we'll be looking and focusing on today. The second area in security challenges that we help customers with is threat intelligence. Threat intelligence today is often purchased individually from threat intelligence vendors out there. A lot of customers subscribe to different various data feeds and data sets and capabilities and reports from threat intelligence providers. Infoblox has our own organic threat intelligence departments. We develop our own threat intelligence that powers our Infoblox solutions. There are many different ways that we develop threat intelligence at Infoblox, everything from examining malware, detonating malware, having honeypots, collecting spam email, processing email, through passive DNS analysis, big data algorithms. So it's a pretty extensive set of capabilities that we have organically here at Infoblox that our security threat analysts and cyber teams use to create the Infoblox threat intelligence that powers the ActiveTrust solution. This threat intelligence, one of the things that makes us a little bit different is that we also allow customers of ActiveTrust to stream our threat intelligence not only into our products like ActiveTrust that we're talking about today, but also to stream it out of our cloud and deploy it into their own additional ecosystem solutions. So, for example, you could stream our bad lists, blacklists, if you will, of host names, domains, IP addresses, or URLs, and you can use those in other security solutions you have deployed in your ecosystem, like a SIEM or a IP firewall or a next-gen firewall or an email gateway or any various solution that you have the ability to fuse additional third-party data into. So that makes the protection that we provide our customers even more comprehensive. The third area of security challenges that we focus on heavily is, the need for to combat kind of the slow threat remediation process. So once you have the protection, and the identification of these DNS threats, right, up and running, you still have the need to follow up on those threats, whether it's to remediate, to prioritize those threats, to put them into your SIEM or ticketing systems or whatever your workflow is today to orchestrate through, along with all your other, security solutions you have deployed. So we focus in that area by helping customers gain context and prioritize threats from DNS by forwarding this into their different solutions. We have a broad ecosystem we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation as well. We use APIs in various different ways to allow customers to access that data. We also provide security teams with an investigation tool as part of the solution to be able to go in and look up additional metadata about a given threat. So for instance, if you were to have a DNS threat based on a certain domain name, you'd be able to enter that domain name and learn more. What's the critical nature of that threat? When was that domain created? What's the who is information? What part of the world or geolocation is that threat emanating out of? Gain more insights into bad actors and who's involved in the threat. So just all the information that not only Infoblox, but our partners that in our Alliance program can provide through our remediation and investigation tools to help customers make, more rapid decisions on threats that are occurring in the DNS space. So those are kind of a summary of the three primary areas that we help customers in their security needs. So a quick overview of the ActiveTrust solution and the three major areas as it relates to those problem and challenge statements that we just talked about for customers. The first one, of course, is the data protection and mitigation. This is what we talked about earlier, setting up the prevention and detection piece. Here in the blue box down below that, you can see that the way, of course, that we do that is through our cloud-based. Actually, we have it both an on-prem and cloud. We'll take a look at that a little bit later, our hybrid model for establishing the DNS firewall to contain those threats. The DNS firewall is not only powered by the threat intelligence that we discussed a little earlier and all the different ways that we gather that threat intelligence, but it also is supplemented with our threat insight in the cloud. This is our behavioral kind of big data algorithms that sit on top of the firewall to do a lot of different algorithms in areas like DGA, fast Flux. They monitor for the tunneling and exfiltration. There's both behavioral and pattern-based algorithms also included inside of the threat insight. Today we support 6 different big data algorithms with the solution, and given the time that we have here in this demo series, we won't be going into a deep dive, but that is another big differentiation of kind of our approach to the cloud-based solution. So together with the DNS firewall and the threat insight, big data analytics, we provide that prevention and detection piece. Moving into the center area, streamlining of security operations. We focus heavily on centralized policy control and enforcement, the ability for customers to be able to come in and configure in a single pane of glass all of their policy and control needs. This allows you to kind of come in and manage from a common set of lists and both reporting and policy setup just to kind of manage the overall segments of your network, your roaming users, your branch offices all in one place. In addition to kind of that centralized policy control, we talked earlier about the value of the threat intelligence and the ability to distribute that. Our TIDE, which stands for Threat Intelligence Data Exchange, our TIDE solution as part of the platform allows customers to stream that intellectual property, that threat intelligence out of our cloud solution in a number of various formats. So this would be streaming out those host names or domain names, IP addresses or URLs that are part of our core solution down, pulling those down into one or more various formats that we support. We support, I think there's around 7 or 8 different formats, including Ceph, Leaf, JSON, CSV, Stix, Taxi, etc. So we have a variety of different support formats that were selected, basically to allow the ease of integration into various systems. So for example, most of your SIMs today will support the Ceph format. So if you pull data down in Ceph, you can load those pretty quickly and easily into your SIM. Other solutions support different formats, so that's why we have the wide variety there. Moving over into the third area, rapid threat investigation and triage. This speaks to kind of the third problem statement that we work with customers on today, which is what happens after a threat is discovered. And so, we talked earlier about our ability to use our investigation tools, both our threat lookup and our dossier investigation tool that provides that additional metadata and context about a threat to help you prioritize which threats are, bubble up kind of at the top of your workflow and should be worked on by your teams, in what order. Lastly, we have our ecosystem integrations. We work today with a variety through our TAP technical alliance programs. So our partnerships include the leading companies in NAC, vulnerability management solutions. We work with Qualys, Rapid7, Tenable, Cisco ICE. There's a whole variety, as well as Endpoint, McAfee. We also work with Carbon Black. So there's a full list of ecosystem partners. If you're interested in more about kind of our partner program and our ecosystem, that's another area that we focus on with our solution. And that was just to name, obviously, a few of our partners. Moving into how the product can be deployed. So today we support ActiveTrust Cloud for all the different deployment models that our customers have. Of course, we start out at the bottom of this picture with kind of the on-premise network-based infrastructures. So ActiveTrust Cloud can be set up as a forwarding. You can forward your DNS queries from your network up into our cloud. We'll talk about some of the cloud-based components in a minute in the middle of the screen there. So you can also, on-prem, you can install our DFP, which is our DNS Forwarding Proxies, as another solution to kind of forward up all those DNS requests to our cloud. So those are two ways for the on-prem. As we look to the right side of the diagram here, there's also kind of the remote users working from home, or often like well, I guess just your remote users, right? So we support both roaming users and or customers and users that have VPN installations. In addition to kind of the roaming users, there are the local kind of branch offices or remote offices that can also be utilized to connect up into our cloud for the DNS protection. So let's take a look in the center of the screen here and talk about some of the different components of the ActiveTrust Cloud solution. So as the traffic DNS queries are forwarded up into our cloud. We have the kind of recursive DNS service, as well as our threat insight. We talked earlier about the big data analytics and all the different algorithms that Infoblox deploys to inspect the traffic. Additionally, you have your unified reporting, the dossier threat intelligence research, and our cloud services portal. So together, those are the major components that make up the solution at a high level. On the far left of the diagram here, we can talk about some of the roles that customer staff plays in utilizing the solution. So clearly the admin staff would be primarily involved in setting up the policy control through our cloud services portal. They'd be able to go in and configure the appropriate policy for allowing, blocking, or logging various base threat feeds and other algorithms that we have made available in ActiveTrust Cloud. They'd also have access to the operational reports, as well as the security operations SOC team analysts. They'd be able to come in and analyze threats as they're happening near real time, and further follow up, as we talked about earlier, with our investigation tools to get that additional metadata. So that's kind of an overview of the different ways, both on-prem or remote office or roaming users, that customers can take advantage of the ActiveTrust Cloud deployment solutions. I'm going to go ahead and expand this one out fully. So in addition to kind of the different deployments, a lot of customers view the hybrid architecture as an advantage for the Infoblox solution. This is another area that we differentiate in how we go to market with the solution. So up in the upper left corner, we have the full cloud-based solution that we talked about earlier on the last slide, the ability for you to forward from your network or your roaming or branch offices. On the bottom right corner of the solution, we have, for customers who deploy our Infoblox DDI solution, the kind of additional capabilities of how we've built kind of our best-in-class hybrid architecture. This enables customers to be able to run ActiveTrust Cloud on their existing grid through upgrading of their existing appliances and forwarding their DNS traffic up to the cloud by leveraging their existing investment, or customers that do not currently today utilize our DDI service. As we discussed earlier, they can bring down to their current network the forwarding proxies or forward their traffic up to the cloud and deploy our client agents for their roaming users. Some of the differentiation of kind of our hybrid solution, by providing both the visibility and single source of networking, that we have the visibility through DDI to provide for customers. As those threats are sent up and detected up in our cloud, we're able to provide additional rich metadata to help customers more quickly identify those threats. Things along the lines of our extended attribution in our DDI solution. We'll be able to provide MAC address and DHCP fingerprints, as well as the source IP of the initiating end host making the DNS request. So we're able to kind of collect up all that information utilizing the DDI footprint that you have in place today. Let's see. Yeah. So I think that covers most of the information that I had provided here in the presentation. I'm going to hand it over now to Blair Rampling, who's going to give you guys an actual live demo of the solution. I'm going to stop sharing now, Blair, for you here.
Sure. So let's have a look at the architecture and how we set up ActiveTrust Cloud. So if you remember from the architecture slide, there's a number of ways to get data into ActiveTrust Cloud. The simplest one that doesn't need any additional agents or anything else installed is just sending that network, sending that data up directly from your networks. So we can define the networks that the data is coming from. This would be the NAT address on the outside of your firewall or router. So we can detect that that data is coming from one of your corporate networks. And then we can set policies on this. So we can see that we have a few networks set up here. We have 3 of them. They have a set of IP addresses and or IP ranges associated with them. So any traffic I see coming into ActiveTrust Cloud will be associated with this network, and I can set policies on it, and then my reports will show it's coming in from that network. That's the simplest way to get started. You can just start sending DNS traffic up to ActiveTrust Cloud with no additional configuration. The disadvantage of that is that we can't see the client IP address. So if you have an infected end host, we can't identify which specific system in your network is infected because of the NAT configuration. It just makes everything look like it's coming into ActiveTrust Cloud from that external IP address of the firewall. So another way to set this up is using ActiveTrust Endpoint. And this is an agent that's installed on either a Windows or a Mac system. And I can see that I have one of these endpoints set up here on a Windows 8 system. And now when that ActiveTrust endpoint on that Windows system sends DNS requests up to ActiveTrust Cloud, I can identify exactly which system it is. And I can see that it is a device called ATE. In the reports, you'll be able to see the user that's logged in. Actually, this user is called Infoblox. That's the user that was logged in the last time that ActiveTrust endpoint checked in with the system. And that check-in happens every 10 minutes. So we can identify who's currently using the system. If it's a system that has multiple logins and multiple users, you'll see who the user was that was logged in when a certain hit happened. And you can kind of identify what's going on with the system. And if we have a look at that system here, I can see that I have this ActiveTrust endpoint installed. The status is protected. So that means it can communicate with the ActiveTrust Cloud. And we can see that it's set up and running, and all of that DNS traffic is going to come up to ActiveTrust Cloud from this system. And it'll be protected, and I can set policies on these ActiveTrust endpoints. Another way we can do this is with a DNS forwarding proxy. DNS forwarding proxy is basically a DNS resolver that sits inside a network. So if you have a remote or a branch office network, instead of sending all of the traffic from that branch office network up using the network's configuration and using that NAT IP, we can install a DNS forwarding proxy. This proxy is a DNS resolver that sits on that local network, and it sends all of the DNS requests that are sent to it up into ActiveTrust Cloud. And I can identify the actual client machines that are sending those requests. So we attach the client IP and some client identifying information. And the DNS forwarding proxy encrypts all of that with the DNS request, sends it up to ActiveTrust Cloud. So instead of only seeing the NAT address of the firewall for all of the requests coming in from that network, now I can actually see the client IPs. So if there is a fixed workstation or some kind of other machine sitting inside that network and it's sending its DNS request to the DNS forwarding proxy, I can identify exactly which machine is infected if it does have some kind of infection. And I can see that I have one of these active right now. And so we can have a look at how this actually works. And if I go into the Windows system and I do a NS lookup on something that I know is a bad domain, when I get the response back, this is actually not the actual response that would be associated with that domain. This is a redirect, and I'll show you that in a minute. I can do the same thing when I send a request into a DNS forwarding proxy. So when I send the same request to a DNS forwarding proxy, in this case, I'm getting an NX domain. So that is being blocked completely. And the fact that there's 2 different responses coming back based on these 2 machines, it comes down to the policies that are set. So if we go into the security policies, this is how you control how all of the different machines and all of the different users are protected on your network. So I have a number of policies. We have a default policy that covers everybody if they're not in another group. I have this policy here that is covering that DNS forwarding proxy. And then I have another policy that's covering my ActiveTrust endpoints. So the Windows system is protected under this policy, and that Linux system is protected under this policy. If we have a look at how the policy is configured, I can see here that the base feed, so these are all of our threat feeds that were discussed earlier, all of our threat intelligence. The base feed is the one that's covering that icar.co, and it's set to block in this policy. So that DFP system that got an NX domain is because this policy is set to block. This policy here has the same feed that's set to redirect. And so when we make that request on the Windows system, we're actually getting a redirect address. That redirect address can redirect to something like a landing page, an internal IT page, or some kind of other page that will pop up in the web browser when I make one of these requests. And the user will see, this was a bad request. There may be something wrong, contact IT or some other landing page, and you can configure that and customize that completely. When we look at the configuration of a policy, we can see that the policy can be associated with network scopes, which are those NAT addresses that are the outside NAT address of your firewall or router. They can be set to DNS forwarding proxies, so I can select which DNS forwarding proxies are associated with this specific security policy. And then we can also have the ActiveTrust endpoints affected by a policy. When I look at what's inside the policy itself, I have all of my feeds. So all of these are the threat intelligence feeds that are provided by Infoblox, and I can set the actions. So I can either allow them, so that's, I don't see any hits, I just allow all that traffic through. I can block, which returns the NX domain back to the client and gives them no DNS response. I can redirect, which gives me that landing page, and it actually gives me a different A record that points to an internal landing page or whatever you choose to set up. Or I can log. So log actually allows the traffic through, but it does log a hit inside the reports. We also have custom lists. So I can set up blacklists and whitelists and set the policies on those. And if I look, I have some custom lists configured. I have a blacklist set. I can see what domains and IPs are in here. So if, for example, example.com will be blocked by this blacklist. Anything with .onion and anything with .top. So onion is obviously Tor sites. And then we can configure these custom lists. We can add and remove things as needed. And we can also import them from a CSV file. So if you have a large blacklist and you want to import everything in all at once, we can import that in. The last thing I mentioned was the redirect page. I can actually customize this. I can either set a IP or a host name that will point it to something like an internal landing page your IT department might have set up. We can use a default redirect, which is a default Infoblox branded landing page that just says you've been blocked because of ActiveTrust Cloud has found some attack. Or you can actually set a custom message. So if you want to build the HTML and have us host it, you can set that up as well. So now that we have gone through all the policies, we can actually see what's happening in the system. So the key report is a security report. And we can see what hits are actually coming in. And so I can see that that request I just made for icar.co from that Windows machine is logged in here. And I can see what the type of attack was. It was a malicious name server attack. I can see where it's coming from. I can see the machine, the user, the threat level and threat confidence, and I can see when it was detected. So I can see in this graph up here, I have all of the hits across the selected hour, and then I can filter those hits. So if I only want to see specifically the ActiveTrust endpoints that we were just looking at, I can filter that and see just the hits from that. We can also have a look at this similar view based on devices. So I can see which devices have how many hits, and we have a count of hits. So we can see that if there's a machine in the devices tab that has a lot of hits, this one here, for example, is 133. You can look at that, and 133 hits over the last hour means something is probably going on with that machine. It probably has some kind of malware infection. It's trying to do something like exfiltrate data, or it's making hits to maybe a malware dropper site or whatever. And I can drill down into this machine, and I can see all the hits on it. So I can look and see what type of hits they are, if they're concentrated in one type of threat class, if it's like a malware dropper threat class, I'll be able to see that and identify that something's going on with this machine. And I can send that to the IT department to go and focus in on that machine and clean it up and make sure there's nothing wrong with it. I can do the same thing by looking at users. So I can see the logged in user and how many hits they have, and the same thing across the different types of views. If we go back to these hits though, and we concentrate on the ones that we just had, I can actually take this threat here and open it in what we call our threat lookup tool. And so if I open this in threat lookup, it pulls this information about why it was blocked. So it's going to go through the information in all of our threat intelligence feeds. It's going to tell me what feed it came from. It's going to tell me who provided that feed, and this is an Infoblox provided feed. We can see when it was first discovered and when it will expire out of that feed, and the type of threat class. And then we have information over here on exactly what that threat means. So I can identify that this is a domain name server specifically for malicious domains. We put that in our feed, we find that in the threat intelligence, and we make sure that that's blocked. If there's new sites that come up, we update these threat feeds constantly. There are a few other reports. We have some threat insight reports that show specific types of attacks. So we can show malware attacks, command and control, and data exfiltration. These are things like DNS messenger, fast Flux attacks, and domain generation algorithm attacks. So we identify those specific attacks and put them in these specific reports. So if there is a lot of stuff going on, you have a lot of activity, we can actually see those specific things. We also have a report that shows total DNS requests. So this is the total number of requests on the system, and then it shows us the number of malicious hits as well, and then we can drill down into some of this information. I think that's about it for the tour. Troy, is there anything else that you'd like to add or I'd like me to drill into?
No, I mean, I think you've covered everything that we need to show on this short demo series. I would just let people know if they want to set up a follow-up, or, you know, it's very easy to set up a trial or evaluation. I know there's going to be a follow-up email at the end of the series to those who registered with some additional materials in it, and, you know, kind of a pathway to engage with Infoblox for more information or to set up a trial. We have customers who've set up POCs or trials very, you know, quickly. I think it really only takes, depending on how the complexity of your trial or POC, it can be as simple as a day or two to kind of get something set up, given how this is layers on top of what you're doing today. That's really the nice thing about the cloud-based solution, is there's really no need to kind of rip and replace things out of your network. Customers are able to kind of get up on trialing and understanding the product and the service pretty quickly. So it's a great way to kind of layer in another security solution into what you're already doing today. Just on the ecosystem piece, I would mention, of course, we aren't really demonstrating in the series our APIs. We do have a threats API, and we're launching a custom API for our feeds list support in our next version. So there are a series of API capabilities as well that we support with the solution. And we're also expanding into adding more support for other types of threats, other new data algorithms, and other capabilities coming out. So, all right, I think that's going to end our series today. I hope everyone found this hit a lot of the high-level touch points that you were looking for, and we look forward to please join us on our next demo series for ATC. I think we're going to be doing these monthly, so we'll look forward to seeing you then. Thanks a lot, and thanks everyone for joining us today.